Hey there, it's Ryan and welcome back to a brand new acrylic landscape lesson. This is going to be in real time, it'll be step by step, and as per usual, all of the tools and materials will be listed in the video description. Now, if you'd like help with the drawing process, I will have the traceable up over on Patreon, along with the real-time sketching video where you can watch me sketch it out. Just make starting the process feel a lot more easy, less intimidating. I know a lot of people struggle with just getting something on the canvas, and I feel like sketching always just makes me feel comfy. But with that up there, you can also get my ebooks, which includes Acrylics for Beginners. This channel is predominantly community funded. We do so up over on Patreon. So if you're watching along, you're learning, you feel like you're having fun, then do consider supporting the channel directly. But with that, today we are going to jump into this lovely landscape together. So let's do exactly that. Let's make something special and let's enjoy the painting process, because it's a pretty wonderful thing and I'm excited about it. So here we have our 8 by 10 inch canvas. We are going to grab our 1 inch flat-headed brush. We'll dip the bottom third of it into a little bit of water just to help extend the wet life of our paint. And then we are going to head into our palette. We'll start in the sky here and we'll begin with a good amount of titanium white, a little bit of our cadmium yellow, a little bit of our Naples yellow, and this will be great for where the sun is really shining through, but I'll get you a bit closer for the actual application. Now we're going to begin simply by heading into the center of our canvas, and we'll apply a nice thick layer of this yellowish hue. Then, as we move both up and down, we're going to make it a little bit more orange. So cad orange, a little bit more cad yellow, and some titanium white to both keep it thick but also desaturate it. We want to slowly build these colors up and make them more saturated. Don't want it to happen too quickly. So I'll apply a line on the top, I'll apply a line on the bottom, and then once we have a good amount of paint, we'll blend them into that midsection. So very softly, just moving the brush up and down until we have a nice natural transition, nothing too sharp. Now, as we do this, we may want to go back into that center area and make it more yellow, more wide. It really is a point of personal preference, but I'm going to go over mine a couple of times simply for the sake of making sure the paint is nice and thick. But here, yellow in the middle, orange on the top and bottom. We'll go and grab more of that orange yet again and work that towards our base. The more you do this, the more you understand the painting, the more you feel comfortable with the painting. So don't feel like you just have to do one layer. Don't feel like you've messed up if you have to go back in. Most of the time it's for the better. You get a great piece because of it. There we go. With that, I think we make the bottom nice and saturated like the top, which just means adding more orange and blending less into the yellows that we have. And then as we continue to get higher, I want to transition this into more of a reddish blue. So I'm actually going to add a little bit of red into our mix, desaturate it with our Naples yellow and titanium white, and apply that right up here, because on this line that you see, that's where we'll start incorporating the ultramarine blue. We just want this to feel nice and strong. If it has a lot of color, it'll elicit more emotion, and I think that's a pretty beautiful place to start. We'll add just a little bit of red to the bottom so it's nice and cohesive. Now, I think I'll grab a bit of that blue and we'll head up in the painting. Okay, so now we can grab some of our ultramarine blue, move that to a clean spot on our palette, mix it with a little bit of our red for a good transitionary pigment, titanium white, and oxide black to desaturate it. We want the initial mix to be a little more purpley because the purple will transition well from the red into the blue as they're between each other on your color wheels. We'll apply this right up here. I will actually start blending it, if I can, into the red that we have, but it may have dried. If it has dried, we can go back in, we can add more red, or we can just make our brush a little bit more damp and do a wet into dry application. Regardless, I think we're off to a good start. I will wet my brush. We'll see if we can do a wet into dry, and that looks pretty good to me. So we're just applying very soft strokes. The more pressure you add with your brush, the harder the lines you'll get. So here we're adding almost no pressure, just trying to get a soft cloud up top. We can even do little clouds out here, just to make it look a little better. And we can thicken the centers as well. There we go. Again, nice and soft. Towards the top, we add more blue to our mix, a little bit more oxide black, a little bit more titanium white. We drift away from the reds in the mix. Create something a little darker for a good vignette effect. And we softly blend this into the last application. Beautiful, great colors, soft blends. Off to a great start. Okay, now for our next layer, we're going to want to make sure that this is all nice and dry to the touch. We're going to want to make sure that our water is nice and clean, as well as our brush, because we're going back into the highlights. We don't want to dilute them with any of the darker pigments we've mixed. With that, we will grab some titanium white, a little bit of our Naples yellow. We will re-interject a nice little line of this into the heart of the yellow, and I'm going to do so with horizontal strokes, as you can see, but they're not going to be perfectly across. Some of them are going to be higher, and I'm doing little drags. Ends up meeting back in that center area. Some of them are going to be lower and disconnected, but this is essentially the real openings in the sky, past all of the warm clouds and hues. And it's just going to create a little bit more depth. The more range of values that we have, the more range of hues, the better. And this is a great step forward. Now we'll grab a little bit more, add some extra titanium white into the Naples yellow titanium white mix. We'll add that to the center and continue building that up. Though, because our brush is damp and has quite a bit of water in it, our applications are a little bit thin. And we may want to actually let some of our pigment dry before we go in and add the really, really bright touches. So a lot of this is kind of, you apply something, you wait for it to dry, you go and you work on another area, and you have fun working back and forth. With that, we'll grab a little bit more yellow, work that into our current mix. We can apply that around what we just applied and continue refining in layer number 2. The first layer is a lot of blocking, figuring out how you want things to be, and then after that we go in and we make the subtle adjustments until we have what we really, really want. Doing this to the top and the bottom, trying to use relatively thick pigment, and again the orange around it has fully dried. So I'm not worried about any blending, but it does mean that we are getting some hard edges on both the top and the bottom. So we need to smooth those by taking some of our orange mix, working that into our yellow. Titanium white, Naples yellow. This mixture I think is going to be a lot less saturated than the initial one. And just creating something a bit more realistic. Those hyper-saturated colors are beautiful, but very oddly, very, I guess, rarely found in nature. Often your oranges are a little more like this. You don't have to make it look realistic, but if you want to, again, I just recommend making things a little less stark. Hopefully these additional layers also help remind you that your first layer doesn't have to be perfect. We can make mistakes in painting, we can try things, we don't have to be fearful of starting, because acrylics are just so malleable, so easy to work with, and we can always try again till we get what we really love. That said, I think I want more of the yellows out within the oranges, so I'm going to create some lines of that, make it look like more subtle clouds. I think that's nice and interesting. Some of them can be sharp, some of them can be a bit softer. There we go. And this is just something you can rework until you're happy with it. Ours don't have to look the same. You could have something much more complicated, or you could have something much more simple. Ooh, I like that. Trying to make the middle of the areas of light more dense, brighter. But sometimes you have to let it dry a little bit. So there's a waiting period, there's a messy period, and in that period you just kind of have to trust the process. And then go back in here. It was a little bit thin. It still is a little bit thin. I need to wait for that to dry a bit more. Same with over here. But eventually we get there. And eventually we get to a painting we love. By the way, if you've ever wanted to just build your patience levels, painting, great way of doing it. I know a lot of us, we love our phones and we love our shorts and our, you know, all of those instant means of gratification. And with that, I think a lot of us start to miss the patience we once had in an era before the fast internet, right? And I think this is a great hobby, a great means of rebuilding that patience. There we go. Adding a lot of detail through these later applications, but I like them a lot. Now you can see when we get up to the top here, it looks a little bit awkward. It's very saturated, this not so much. So we're going to create more transitionary areas. Cad orange, Naples yellow, hint of our cad red. We'll apply that right up here. Try to blend it into some of our previous applications. I'm going to go with a pretty damp brush just to keep my paint wet for a longer period of time. Beautiful transitions into these clouds. And then it'll get a little bit harsh, a little bit awkward as we get up towards the blues, just because they are so stark. But I'm going to use a very soft back and forth, like so. We'll actually move it up over the purple. And now I think we reincorporate some more red. Also, apologies if my brush or hand are just very much in the way visually through any of this painting. I haven't painted on an easel like this in a long time. I'm used to more of a top-down setup, but I don't know, I thought I'd just try something a little more nostalgic. We painted like this for years, and I really liked doing it, but I kind of fell out of practice. So again, my apologies if my hand covers it here and there. I am trying to be mindful, and I will get better at this. But do trust that we are in that process. With that, I'll grab a little bit more cad red, a little bit more ultramarine blue. We'll go back to this mix. Bit of titanium white, Naples yellow. Ooh, that's a good color. And we'll reestablish what we had at the top. Maybe even making a softer transition this time. Yeah, already I like this better. Goes to show that going back in can be very beneficial. I think when I started painting, I'd paint something that I kind of liked, or I liked a good amount, and then I'd be afraid to go and rework it. and then other portions of the painting would kind of suffer because of it. And then I got a lot better as a painter when I started saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to go back in anyway, I'm going to do the extra layer, I'll figure it out. If it looks a little bit worse for a minute, that's okay. I'm a big believer of layer number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know? Beautiful. Okay. We're going to move up to the top now. A little more oxide black, a little more titanium white, a little more ultramarine blue. We're moving farther away from the cad red every time we move up. I'm making this a bit more gray though. It's less bright than it was. Or, no, it's more bright than it was. And that'll make the silhouettes of our trees shine better. Ooh, okay. I like that. That's dynamic, that's interesting. I think we'll switch on over briefly to our little liner brush. We'll make sure that it's nice and damp, and that'll condense the bristles together. And then I'll go in and do the centers of some of these clouds, just make them a bit more thick. Still going to blend the edges to the best of my ability with this, but just make something a little bit more powerful, substantial. It's also going to add good scale, because if our clouds look tiny in the background like this, it shows that they're pretty far away, and it makes the sky look vast. That's another trick. If you do really tiny clouds in your painting somewhere, it'll make your sky look much more grand, much more epic, if you will. It's all about creating variance of size and scale. Similarly, if you want a lot of depth, you have big trees in the foreground, you got really little trees in the background, and you get so much easy depth that way. You don't have to do it, but it's a good little trick. Here you can see we're just adding in tiny clouds here and there. Nothing too dramatic. We'll have big trees on the left and the right hand side. There we go. Combining some of the purples from the top to the bottom. Maybe do some tiny little ones back here just to keep the eye moving. Having so much fun with this already. Also, this is a winter painting, and I'm not sure if you can hear it in the background, but we have a very windy day. We've actually had a lot of wind warnings in Ontario as of late, and I love painting snowy scenes on windy days like today, despite the noise, because it always really reminds me of the start of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The kind of claymation animated film from way back in the day. Grew up watching that every year, and I don't know, there's something about the wind and painting winter scenes that really brings me back. I think a lot of us paint for nostalgia, bring us back to a time, a place, a feeling, and windy days like this certainly do that for me. So I hope you feel that too. But there's a bunch of little clouds. I'm going to rotate my easel a little bit just in case you have a reflection. And I think you do. This is another thing to note. There we go. With acrylics, when they're wet, they're very reflective. So if you're looking at it from the wrong angle, sometimes a darker hue like this can look a lot brighter, and you don't have the actual view of it. So do try to work your way around your painting as you paint, especially if you have a fixed lighting source and you're painting like I am at night. You get a better accurate view of your piece. That said, this is looking great. Very happy so far. I do need to go in here and make that a bit more thick, but I also need to let it fully dry and clean my brushes. So I think it's time we go and make a little drink. might be a tea, might, to be honest, be a coffee. It's a little late, but you know, we do want to do this painting and we are having fun with it. So I will see you in just a minute once I clean everything, and you know, through the power of editing, you'll actually see me right now. Okay, so here we are from afar. It has just about dried, and as you can see right through here, there are a couple thin spots on the canvas. So we are going to get really close. We're going to cover that up with some thick paint, and then I think we can start moving into the backing trees. But just a little bit more thickness, a little bit more detail here, and we are ready to move on. Now that we are so close, I'm going to show you that we're going to be using a brand new brush. This is a filbert. You can see that the edges are nice and round. That makes soft blends quite easy. Great for things like clouds and mist, but I'm actually not going to wet this. I want thick pigment, and that means we're not going to dilute it with water. Instead, we will just grab our paint, move it to a clean spot on our palette, grab a little bit of our Naples yellow, and we'll apply that right through here. And hopefully the rounded edges of our brush help us deliver something that doesn't leave a sharp marking on the edge. We're going in soft, but because we are using a lot of paint and no water, we are avoiding the ability to easily blend. That said, I think it's all working. I think it's all working very well. We have a lot of diffuse, beautiful, warm light working its way through these subjects. You can see that I'm going back up to all of the areas that are nice and illuminated, and I'm just adding a hint of this highlight into it. This area still needs another layer, but I do probably need to let it dry before I try again. So right now we're just working everywhere else, making sure that we have those good transitions. You can even really soften your applications with a little bit of blending in the finger. Maybe we grab slightly more cad yellow, because we do have a lot of yellow towards the edges. And right now we're just making very minor changes, but cumulatively they do add up. They do have an impact, and I feel like this time is often very much worth it. The Naples yellow, extremely important in all of this to keep it not too saturated. There we are. Hope you're having fun. Hope you're enjoying. Hope you feel like you're learning things. And I hope you're getting excited about working on your paintings as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for painting along with me. Okay, I think that looks great. Let's check out what it looks like from a bit of a distance. So we take steps back, and here we can see the larger painting. I actually really like the thickness that we have through there, and I think it's time we start working more so on the foreground, or at least the midground, the areas with the back of the trees through here. And we're going to do so using the larger flat-headed brush. We'll grab some Oxide black, a little bit of our Ultramarine blue, a little bit of our Cad red, titanium white, because we don't want it to be a pure black. We want it to be a silhouette, but still have a bit of hue in it. And then for the actual application, I'm going to begin by just tapping in the top of this tree. And I'll work this way down over our sky. This application was inevitable, so we're not ruining anything, we're not hindering anything, we're doing what we initially intended. We'll do another tree right through here. And I'm doing lots of taps because it gives us a natural bark look rather than a line, which will also probably inevitably curve in ways that we don't really want it to. On top of that, we'll do some additional little trees towards the bottom. We're trying to make sure that their heights are all different from each other. I can honestly still see a little bit of my sketch showing through the paint, which is making this really easy, though you do want thick layers in the background. There we go. Okay, at this point, we can actually start using the excess paint on our brush towards the bottom to just cover up the white of the canvas. Like so. We can do a lot more trees than this, by the way. This is just to get us started. I use an X-shaped pattern when I'm in larger open areas because it helps me move paint left and right, up and down, all at the same time. We'll cover up our fire because we can always resketch it in later. It's pretty intuitive where it is, but if you would like the extra help with the drawing, where the trees are, where the fire will be, getting everything back in there, you can find the traceable up over on Patreon, along with the real-time drawing video where you can see me sketch out the initial drawing that's on the canvas. We talk about the composition, how and why we're changing it, all of that good stuff. So that's there if you'd like to see it. It's not necessary, but if you just want the extra video or the easier start, it's an option. That said, we're going to mix up more of the paint that we currently have. And I know you're pretty far away from everything we're doing. It's meant to be that way right now because I just want you to see how it all works compositionally. How all of these are distanced from each other, they're varying heights, and with that, we are going to switch back on over to our liner brush. We'll grab this pigment, and then we'll start working little protrusions out. These again are drawn on the traceable, but you can get creative with it as well. Here we have a couple of goals. Towards the top branches that you see here, we have a lot of belling, so areas where your foliage works its way upwards. In the middle, say right around here, it'll get a bit more flat. It'll get larger, so longer outwards, but as you can see, it doesn't do the little swoop towards the top. Instead, it can kind of come down. And another thing that we're trying to do is make sure that our branches don't protrude on the left and right hand side at the same point every time. So if I do a branch here, I'm not going to do one here. I'll go up or down a little bit, and I'll just try to keep them pretty varied. Occasionally they will connect in the middle because there are branches that, and this is important, move in front of the tree and behind the tree, not just to the sides of the tree. And when a branch goes in front of the tree like this, it's going to go on both sides, and then it'll kind of swoop down on both sides. This one will be rather symmetrical, though they don't have to be because, you know, they can lean to one way or another. And these do need to start extending out farther and farther. I will get you a lot closer for some of the detail work, but I just want you to get a larger view first, because more so than the details here, the spacing and the composition are really key. Oh, this is exciting. I haven't painted on an easel in a long time, and I think there's something about it that just feels very painterly. I think it's easier, to be honest, painting on a flat surface, just laying the canvas down. And therefore there's a catharsis in that for sure. But I think I missed this a little bit. And going back and forth is probably it's going to keep me happiest in the long term. So maybe we do this for a little while. Now as we get down here, remember, they don't all leaf up. They go to the sides, and then they eventually even droop down like this, because the weight of the foliage is just getting to become too much for the tree, and it's important that it finds its way down in a natural way. Going over some of these a couple of times because I am using a lot of water. It's really thinning the pigment, and as a result we're getting thin applications where we want this to be nice and opaque, unless it's towards the edges of the little protrusions, because those are tiny, light will wrap around them, but in the back, the middle portions of these trees, the silhouettes are pretty key. There we go. We're doing really well with this. I will move you a lot closer though, as we have essentially completed the start of this tree. We still need to add snow to it. We still need to add dimension to it. But again, I think this is a strong beginning, and we don't really have to do too much more. Right now I'm just adding little protrusions, tiny, tiny branches. And again, much like the clouds, by adding tiny branches, you add a lot of scale to your trees. You just want that variance. So now we are a lot closer, and we can continue just adding our tiny little protrusions. Lots of belling towards the top, going down before I go this way, so that again I'm not always just doing this right in a predictable manner. You can leave little holes and openings within your foliage as well, as there will be portions of the tree which are more open. Even in the center area, something fun we can do is we can even skip a little spot and then head down yet again. And then it can get dense, and the painter in us will think, oh, it looks like I missed an area. But in actuality, in reality, it looks like nature. It looks real, because in nature there will be portions of trees and subjects that are less developed, or simply just don't have any foliage at all due to weather or animals or a lot of different things. And we'll go back and forth and we'll adjust, and we'll find new areas to keep open. Sometimes we have an opening and we decide, you know what, that's not the place for it. So we go back and we redo until we like it. But just keep your mind open to those scenarios, those settings. There we go. I like that a lot. Now, something we didn't talk about is you can just add bonus trees in between your other trees, because there will be a lot of them. We won't really see much of these, so I didn't draw them in initially. But you can just add trees behind your trees behind your trees. It's really not a bad idea. Make them tinier to make them look farther away, create more depth, but nice and easy. It's also important that your trees overlap other trees. Talk about that all the time, but it would look really awkward if they just kind of bended around each other. So you want, say this, for example, to have other branches that layer over it. It's probably around the middle of the trees, so it's a bit more horizontal as a whole, right through here. Broke my rule of going to the left and the right at the same time. Occasionally that'll happen, and that's okay, because again, there will be foliage that moves in front of and behind the tree. We just want to make sure that it's not the norm, not the average. There we go. Now we move even farther towards the left-hand side, being incredibly careful towards the top. Have a lot of these diagonal branches which move up. Then we'll get into a slightly bigger one which will have branches attached to the branches. We'll do a little one in the middle, breaking our rule to show that there's one behind or in front. But we'll make sure we go to the edges and we build those up as well. I love this part of the painting because you really, again, have an opportunity to work on patience and just meticulous activity. We're always trying to keep it evolving. We're always trying to diversify and make it different from the other portions you've done. That way it's continuously engaging for the viewer, but also realistic. Because there are patterns in nature, but those patterns aren't going to look synthetically similar. And what do I mean by that? I mean when we are growing up and we're watching television or cartoons, reading comics, or, you know, partaking in media that is human drawn, often we see subjects heavily simplified. And because we see them when we're young, we burn those images and those ideas into our head. And we say, okay, well, a tree is brown. And it's a cylinder and it's straight. And then when you get older and you take pictures or you paint and you really look at trees, you realize like, oh, you know, it's not a perfect cylinder or round. One area is a bit more condensed. One side is a little squared, interestingly. It's also not just brown. It's a lot of greens and grays, and there's touches of yellows. And on not a sunny day, maybe there's a lot of blue reflections in it. And this is very similar in that we don't want that imposed idea of what these subjects look like in our heads. We want something more interesting, unique, and real. And we accomplish that through these meticulous motions, these continued thoughts throughout the process. There we go. Great tree. Great little tree. We still have some trees to go. This one's a good distance from us, but we're still going to put a real amount of detail into it. Beautiful. For the sake of realism, we're also going to obstruct it. Add another tree right there. Make it look messy and overly busy, because that's the way it would really be in nature. Do another one right through here. And I know what you're thinking, we're really taking out a lot of the orange at the bottom. Don't worry, we'll reinstigate that later, and we'll create some extra depth. Then we'll make sure that the painting is color on all areas of it. Just trust the process. We will go back, we will re-interject, and we'll do a good job. Promise. That said, the more we do this, the better we'll get at it. The quicker we'll get, the more efficient. So you can see I'm kind of flying through this tree. But I might leave part of this open, as we talked about a while ago, for the sake of making it more unique. There we go. We also have smaller trees on the left and right hand side, and we're doing so intentionally so that the eye pushes you towards the middle. We have a hierarchy. It's subconscious and it's subtle, but it makes an impact. So while this tree is taller than these two, it's far less tall than what we actually have on the sides of the painting, or in the center rather. The sides of the painting will also be quite tall, but there'll be foreground trees and they'll be quite a bit different. You'll see what I mean soon. Okay, so from here, we let all of that fully dry. I cleaned my brushes and my water, and we are going to go back to a nice orange, which means we have our titanium white, our cadmium yellow, our cadmium orange, hint of our cad red, and a good amount of our Naples yellow. That said, our goal is to render this pigment that we just have at the bottom of the sky, something akin to it. And I think we actually got it on our first try. Now we'll make it slightly more red, slightly more orange, like so. And we'll switch on over to our liner yet again, because we have a lot of light in the top of the painting and we need to move it to the bottom so that it all feels nice and cohesive. With that, we grab our liner, we grab some of our orange, and we see all of these little openings. We double down on the ones that we really like, on the ones that we feel like are integral to the piece. But then, in addition, we start creating additional little openings down here, and this allows us to bring our highlights into new areas of the painting that feel natural, well distributed. This is a very important step for bridging what will be the sparks from the bottom of the painting up into the top of it. That said, let me get you quite a bit closer. We'll do this together. So again, nice and close. We don't want too much water in these applications because then we'd really thin the pigment, and we need thick pigment to accomplish what we're trying to through here. I'm also trying to create little lines that go in between our trees, but I'm also not trying to create too much pattern. So if there's a line, I might move a little piece to the left or right of it. And sometimes a line rather than a tap can do a lot for the painting. But you can see just how much detail we've been able to add very quickly, very simply. And again, once we have our fire here and the sparks are coming up, it'll all meet in the middle. It'll be a little ambiguous as to what's what, and that'll be a really neat viewing experience. Just trust the process. Take our time, and we'll, as always, try to make something special together. Hey there, it is the next day. It is a snowy day, and it is a day I am excited to do some more painting. With that, this is of course fully dry. We are working with acrylics. That does not take long, and we are back with a palette of fresh pigments. I have some titanium white, our oxide black, and ultramarine blue. Our next step is going to be adding snow to all of these background trees, and then we can move to the midground, the foreground, and start tying it all together. But for our first round of snow, we are going to grab some titanium white. Because this is all dry, we can actually just mix it right here. About an equal mixture of our ultramarine blue, and then about a quarter of that in our oxide black. Now I'm going to take a look at this. I'm going to do a little test on here, see if it is in fact the value I want for my snow. I want this to be not too bright, not too dark. I really want a mid value, and I think this is good, but it could be a little darker and it could be a little bit more saturated. So we're going to just interject some additional ultramarine, blend that out quite well. I think now it might be a little bit too saturated, so we'll just work backwards, and in the process we'll build up our mix to be larger, more paint to work with, and that's nice. So we just going to go back and forth until we get exactly what we want, and I think this is it. That is pretty beautiful. I really like it for the first layer. And with that, we're going to put this brush down. We're going to pick up our detail heavy brush, that is our liner. Make sure it's nice and damp. We'll grab our pigment, and then I'm going to apply this over the portions of the branches which are big enough to accommodate snow. Do it like that. The snow is going to wrap around in front of the tree, so I'll have some here towards the tops of these branches, heading down. And I'm trying not to make my branches significantly larger with this, but rather just add to the general shapes we have. That said, I recognize you're quite far away, so I'm going to get you a bit closer, and then we'll continue together. Okay, so from here, yet again, we grab some pigment. We head up to the top of our branches, and we just work this along. Nice and simple, like so. Grab a bit more, again towards the top, like so. Yet again. Really like how this is wrapping around. Like how it's a darker pigment, so it's subtly incorporating with the pre-existing markings, and you can still see a lot of the darker marks underneath what we are currently rendering, which is very important for this process. We do want it to look layered on top of the actual trees, not to become the tree itself. Still using a bit of water, but not too much, because we don't want to thin it to any great degree. We want it to be nice and opaque. And as we come down here, things get a little bit more complicated as our branches do get bigger, and they start to move out in unique ways, not only again to the left and right, but also forward and back. So here we're just starting to make it up, saying, okay, if the branch is big and it's drooping down, how is it going about that? What's the visual look like? We're going to need to start leaving a bit more of our silhouetted pigment, that darker color, but that's not too hard. That just means we add less paint. We do less work. So here, again, the idea is this is a large branch, this is a branch, and now we can just make them up as we go, because we are in this undefined space, and we are trying to make sure that they're always just nice and unique. I think that's the big part of it. Maybe we have another one that works its way across here through the center. Just goes to show that it's working its way through the middle of the painting. And we have another one through here. But we will have to go over that one because it had a lot of water on the brush and it was just a little bit thin. We can also do little incorporations. And with that, I think we head back up to the top. I didn't want to do the top in the very beginning because I wanted to warm up somewhere. As again, this is my first time painting today, but now that we have, let's head back and let's finish up that more detailed area. We have our pigment.
we are going to be careful that we keep our edges sharp and our smaller, more delicate areas still nice and delicate. We don't need an overabundance of snow. In these tiny places, sometimes the snow won't be able to grab and stick on, right? But it is really nice to have the color at the top of the canvas in the way that we do now. There we go. I think that's pretty strong. Now, let's head back down in the painting and continue working on the rest of our trees. Now, initially, this is going to look a little bit awkward, so we only have one tree with this, but once we start building our layers of snow in the background as well, they'll start to make a lot more sense. And as you do this, you're going to get a lot faster, you're going to get a lot more comfortable. There are, I guess, larger rules that once you kind of understand, you take a break after a little one, sometimes you move it in front, sometimes you just stick to the sides, you just keep it changing. It makes a lot more sense and it feels a lot better. There's also, and I don't think I mentioned this, only the first layer. And we are going to add highlights, we're going to make this look more three-dimensional, but this is the foundation of what we're working towards. And we will get there. Just need to trust the process. Okay. Now, yet again, taps to the top, taps through here, and then towards the bottom. So far, so good. Like that. We're doing real detail work. Very soft touches with the brush. You really don't want to apply a lot of pressure, because if you do, you end up creating much larger markings. And those are just not what we want in the background. By having the really tiny markings back here, we make these markings look a lot bigger, and therefore we create variance in scale. And that variance in scale is really important. Let's get you a bit closer again. We'll say, always love jumping into a painting on a brand new day when I've already started the painting. I think for me, I'm somebody who kind of defaults to struggling with beginning, but then once I start, I just feel like it goes so easily. And at least, sometimes the painting itself doesn't go easily. Sometimes the painting itself is a little tricky, and I'm problem solving, and I'm going over things time after time, doing layers, but I feel like mentally it's just a lot easier. I feel like it's fun to explore once I've started. So even if things are going wrong in the painting and I'm not getting the thing I'm trying to accomplish done the first time on the first try, I still feel like I'm in it, and I'm engaged, and I'm enjoying myself. And the hardest part for me is often just starting. It's just getting paint on the canvas. Because with a lot of these, they are paintings, but they're also lessons and tutorials, and I want to make sure that I'm layering everything in the most efficient way. That way it makes for the best video, and that you can learn in the most efficient way. And because of that, sometimes it takes me a while to start a painting. I just go over the process in my head time after time. And so again, when I have a new day like today, and I'm jumping into a pre-existing painting that I've already started, it's a great feeling. I'm feeling good. And I also know, for those of you who are like myself and kind of struggle with starting, friendly reminder that just getting something on the canvas can really help. For me, I always try to do a drawing, even if I know that I'm going to cover up all of it with paint. Just getting something on there really helps me get over that mental hurdle of starting. So I think that can be really important. I think it can also be really good for understanding the piece that you're going to do. So I'd always recommend starting with a drawing. If you're up over on Patreon, you can download the traceable to get that drawing on there. You can also watch me draw it in real time up over on Patreon. I do have a video. I think this one's 35 minutes, so it's a bit of a longer one, but that's because we're talking about composition and just why we're making all the decisions that we are. We changed the composition in this from the reference photo pretty dramatically, I'd say. I'd also note another little trick if you're, again, just struggling with getting started. Something I like to do is I write down the steps of the painting. So I say, okay, step 1, I'm going to mix a light blue for the sky. Step 2, I'm going to mix a dark blue. Step 3, I'm going to blend the two. Step 4, I'll let it dry. Step 5, I'll work on a much lighter blue, a lot of added titanium white. I'll switch to the filbert brush, and then I'll do a really soft blend with that to create some clouds. And then I'll switch to the liner brush to define the details that I want to afterwards. You know, just writing things down in that nature, I think, can really help me. And maybe it helps you. Maybe you watch these, you write down the steps as you go, and then you go out and make your actual painting. But there are a lot of little tricks to get the brain excited and ready. I think getting the brain excited is also another thing. Sometimes if I want to do something, I'll watch people do it on YouTube, kind of like this. And then I'll say, oh, you know what, that does look fun. I do want to try that. I do want to do that today. And then I'll go and I'll do it. And I always hope that these videos do that for you a little bit, get you excited and motivated, and just get the idea of painting comfy and fun, right? The goal of these lessons isn't just to teach you how to paint this snowy scene or how to teach you how to paint these subjects in general. I mean, it is both of those things, and I do want you to be able to take these ideas with you into future works and paintings. But it's also just to motivate you to paint, to remind you that painting is a wonderful, beautiful way to spend time. It can be fulfilling, it can be relaxing, it can be exciting, it can be all these different things depending upon where our headspace is and what we're looking for out of it, right? That said, as I get down here, a lot of these markings are abstract. They're kind of guessing where we'll have branches. But we do have this bigger tree, so probably continue its larger branches first. I'm prioritizing the trees that are in the foreground, and then I'm doing the rest. As I said, we do have a large bottom space to attempt, so I'm just going to touch up these other trees back here first, and then we'll work on all of the bottoms of the trees together. Because again, it does get a little more nebulous, but we can and we will figure it out. Make it look good. Okay, so now we're going to grab a little bit more paint. And again, we have this big tree. Let's work on some of this large branch together. And here I'm trying to imagine there being a bottom branch, and then I'm just outlining the edge of it. So in theory, it goes up like this. It's a big triangle, and here's the bottom portion. This is the area that sticks out. This is the area that'll get the most snow. Grab a bit more. Say, okay, maybe there's another branch down here. And it'll work up like this. There we are. So again, implied that we have a big piece of foliage, and this is what's showing. Going over it a couple of times just to build up opacity. And then we'll continue down. And I'm painting almost with a very watery mix right now. It's not super opaque because I'm drawing, and then I double down on my applications and my ideas as I realize I really like them. I think I could include another little one through here. These are all really big, and I want to create more variance, so I'm just going to throw in a couple little pieces that can continue to convey these larger ideas. And then we, again, move this up. There we go. Now, I think we're just about out of paint, so I'm going to mix up a little bit more while it's still slightly wet. And that way we don't lose the pigment. Sometimes when paint dries, it changes color a little bit, gets a little darker. So for the sake of understanding its true value, we're just going to do that mix now. We can also make it slightly darker because we are working pretty low in the painting. And there isn't going to be that much light towards the bottom, right? That said, here's the next branch in a series of many for here. And then here's another one. We're getting towards the bottom of the tree, so these are larger, they're droopy, and they are beautiful. There we go. Now I'm going to just turn that down a little bit because it's pretty bright. Give you a more accurate representation of the values and colors. Okay. Let's just do a little bit more small markings in between these to show, again, that this is bigger and in the foreground. Let's do that to the other side, doing kind of horizontal, loose markings. And then down here again is where we're back into more definitive sizing. There we go. So now we have very full trees, quite a few of them, and I think this is a great start. Now we're just going to do a little bit of a zoom out, that way we can see it as a whole, and we're going to add some highlights to the tops of these trees. And that means we're taking our current mix, we're adding some blue, we're adding some white, we're brightening. We'll keep a good amount of that blue saturation, and we will yet again apply with the brush that does the best job with intricate, intentional detail. So now we'll go back in and apply this to the best of our ability towards the tops of the snow, like that. We'll leave the bottom of these applications, so there's still a bit of a rim that, here's the highlight, and then here it moves down, right, at the end of the branch. So branch is sliding, and this is the end, and here's where the snow kind of caps, and you can see the edge, and that's going to be darker because it's not going to get as much light. So again, highlight goes on the top of the branch, and we leave a little bit of space at the bottom for our initial mix to show through. I know you're a little bit far away, but I just wanted to show you a bit of a distant but accurate representation of the variance in value. That way you know how stark the variance should be. It's also worth noting that we're not really going to add this much to the bottom area. We can do a little bit, but we're not going to have so much light down here. So it's much more subtle in this space. The real highlights happen towards the top. With that, let me get you a little bit closer. Now we're lucky in that I am painting this as the sun is starting to get lower in the sky. We have this warmer light outside despite it being a snowy season, and I think it's adding a really nice hue to the painting. I feel like we get a lot of afternoons like this here in Ontario during the winter. Always love those skies. There we go. Going to the top. These highlights will show up even better up here because we have a darker area as a whole. And that'll be nice. Again, not trying to expand upon these too much, just add some brightness to the very top. It's not the most dramatic difference ever, but it's something. It builds depth, and it's definitely worth doing. Now again, I'm going to bounce around a little bit. Probably won't add this to every tree, but the areas in which I feel there will be some extra light, or we'll actually be able to see this variance, I think we put in that extra time and we do the extra nice highlights. Again, not too much down here because we shouldn't have that much light. Now we can also try to add it to these backing trees, but because the markings are so small, you have to be extra careful. And you also have to accept that you're probably not really going to notice much of a difference here. I'll do it again a little bit for consistency's sake, and I'll do it on every tree just a little bit for consistency's sake. But this really is a subtle addition to an already pretty established idea elsewhere. There we go. I love painting these. It's one of those things where I always say my favorite season to paint is fall, and I love doing the fall paintings, but then I do the winter paintings and I feel like I'm so happy doing these too, and I think we just have a lot of great seasons to appreciate. I think that's what it is. I think if you look for the good, you find it, and I think there's a lot of good to be found. That's a lot of highlight down there. Maybe a little bit too much. I'm going to be careful, but I'm also going to balance it just a little bit, like so. That is looking good. However, it can look a little bit better. Let's grab more titanium white, more ultramarine blue. I'm going to start mixing this down just so I can see the original mix up here and I can compare them as I mix. That said, the goal right now is simple. It's slightly more white and blue. I just want a brighter pigment. For highlights, high up. So this is our third round of snow. It's a different value than all of the others. And as you can see, it's a subtle variance, but it is yet another variance. And that's what it's meant to be. Definitely need to be careful with it moving down because, again, there just won't be that much light. We can do a hint here and there, and then the majority of it happens on our way to the top. And because we've already done this twice over, it does just get easier and easier. And that's pretty wonderful. Everything has just about had time to dry, so I'm not blending with the darker last mix. It really is just going on new and fresh. I'm not using a lot of water on my brush, so I'm being very careful not to make big markings, but it is nice and opaque because of that. Do the little bell shapes and highlight. And maybe we do so just a little bit to some of the trees out here, but not a lot of them, because this is meant to really garner attention, and I don't want to spread that out too much. I want my main subjects to look like my main subjects. There we go. Now you can see the variance from real highlight down as we move. And that's how it should look. It's a gradient, but it's not a soft gradient. It's a progressive gradient, and one that I think we did a really good job with. Now, from here, we enter a very exciting part of the painting, and that's expansion. We can do a lot more in this in terms of detail and highlight and all of that, but we don't want to make it not balanceable later on. So we're actually going to work on the trees to the left and right hand right now. Start with silhouettes, build them up as we did this, but these are a lot closer to us, so they'll be more detail focused. I also think I want to go back in and add a soft gradient at the bottom here, darkening on the way up. But for now, we are back to the larger, flat 1-inch brush. We have our Oxide black on the palette. We have our Ultramarine blue to make this pigment saturated. We'll add a little bit of titanium white, but again, for the most part, this is an Ultramarine blue, and this is an Oxide black. Then, I'm going to work on the middle of this tree, and I can see it in my drawing here. I'm just going to work that all the way up, as this does expand to the top of the painting. So we're just doing it with little taps, and of course I like to do it this way because it gives me a much more natural tree structure than if I were to do a singular line. If I were just to drag the brush, we would lose a lot of these fun little intricacies that we are now building through this process of the little tap. So I'm going to show you over here what not to do, and then I'll fix it. So what we are not doing is we're not going to the top or the bottom and then making a singular line downwards. If you look at this line versus this one, this looks much more organic, much more ornate, much more real. So now how do we fix this one? We go back in and we do some taps and we add some little unique pieces to both sides, and that already looks a whole lot better. That said, there are more than just one of these over here. This one to the left of it is going to be a little bit bigger. We want variance of size. There we go. I'm going to make sure the tops are nice and clean. And so far you can see that we have some good framing devices. Very important. Now I think because this was quite watery, we're actually going to go back over it again. Build this up until it is nice and opaque, as we do with acrylics. And then I think we're going to start working on some branches. And again, you can go back to the traceable, you can work these in organically, you can look at the reference photo. I'm looking at the reference photo and I think I know what I'm doing because I did draw it already, but we're going to work some branches into the sides. Now this tree is really close to us, closer than this. So this one is already going to have a lot of the branches that kind of move out and down because the midpoint is more so through the top here. So this is where we're going to get more horizontal line work, and we can just start that quite simply, and then we can start adding a little bit more of the areas that come down through here. And this is extremely rough, and that's okay. That is a-okay. It's just the start of the process. I'm going to do a lot to this over the next hour. Trying to create consistent variance. On on both sides of the tree. There we go. I also don't want it to extend too much because I don't want to take out too many of these trees. But I also recognize that once we get to about this point, the tree needs to be full. Also, again, I apologize if my hand ever gets in the way. We are relearning how to film with the tripod and easel rather than what I've been doing, which is a top-down shot on my desk. I don't know, there's something about painting on an easel that just feels romantically painterly. I think it's important to romanticize your hobbies and what you love in life. And I think this just helped me do so. I forgot it for a while because I do think it's quicker often for me to paint on a desk, but I think this just makes me happier. And that's important. That is very important. Okay, so again, branches both sides, openings here and there, goes to the top. All of these edges extremely rough, that's okay. Okay, so welcome back to the evening. We are still working on that area of canvas just post dinner, and we're going to take this pigment right down here. Whenever I have a large area like this, while I am trying to be intentional with the edge, as we will be here, when I move upwards and the negative space, I try to use an X-shaped pattern with my brush because it moves paint not only left and right, but also up and down and gives us a nice even spread. So we'll just get that onto the canvas. We'll have a lot of paint down here, but we don't really need to worry about that right now. So we'll just create an implied bottom, which we'll definitely edit and change later, but for the sake of understanding the volumes that we have within the branches, the general shapes, we'll put something like that in there. Again, just to get a good idea. Now, I think we probably head back up in our silhouette and we start working on some details within these currently very rough branches. And now we are back to the smaller liner brush. We are back to creating lots of little unique pieces that expand. And towards the top here, I am doing individual little markings, but they will become larger branches full of snow very quickly. Remember that this isn't necessarily the very top of the tree, and that we're going to have more up there, which means that this is a bit more horizontal than the top of the tree would be, where this would be much more bell-shaped. We still have a little bit of a bell shape towards the ends of some of these, but it's significantly less than the proper top. I'm also going to move my water dish, just a hint. That way we're able to paint a little bit quicker. I find positioning the water dish actually has a really big impact on my painting experience. One of those things where if it's too far away and it's in an awkward reach, I don't grab it as much as I should, and it leads to larger applications that I want to make. So just try to make sure that the tools that you need accessible are in fact accessible, and it'll probably have an impact on what you're making. Okay, here I think they're definitely getting larger. And you can see there's a lot of water on my brush. I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful with that. And hopefully this just goes to show that even when you are practiced, even when you know what you're doing, even when you have a plan, sometimes you grab a little bit too much of one thing or another and you kind of have to course correct along the way, and that's okay. just here to figure it out and have fun with the process. I think all of that looks pretty clean. I think we'll thicken this up a bit, and then we'll head down into here as well. Yet again, we'll just change the angle, that way you get to see well, that way I don't accidentally have my hand over the canvas, and we can paint this the way that we really want to. While these will have snow, and be pretty voluminous, I am still trying to have them overlapping and be unique in that way. I am still painting little protruding points and such, so that if we don't add snow in all of the areas that we don't add it to will still be realistic and interesting. I think it's quite important to have a good balance. Really like this as a framing device so far. I think this area is the weakest, but we do need to let it dry before we go back in. I really like the tops of these trees. I think we're going to try and keep them undisrupted. But I am a big believer that sometimes we do have to cover up nice old past layers for the sake of building good new foundations. Okay. Now, as we head on over to the other side of our painting, we're going to do something a little different in that we're going to have a lot of branches that are reaching upwards. I'm going to start by showing you this by a bit of a distance, and then we'll get closer for the real detail work. But the idea here is that we are closer to the top of the tree, and we are seeing more of those unique little branches that reach for the top rather than ones that either go horizontally or simply fall back down. This also means creating clusters like this out here, and then it's just a little branch that brings you back inwards. Now you are going to want these clusters that also move in front of the tree and behind it, so that means creating them in spaces like this that overlap the center. Probably have a preference for a dominant side. This one is more on the left than it is to the right, but it's still on both. And then again, more of these little pieces, and then a little line that brings you back inwards. We're just going to go to the very top, create little ones here and there, but it's quite a different look than what we have over here. It's a similar type of tree, but it's a different distance, and therefore we're painting it differently. I always get asked the question, how do you draw this subject or that? And often the answer varies quite dramatically based off of how far the subject is from you. Hopefully this is a good example of a couple of those instances. That said, right about here, I think things are going to start evening out a bit more. They're going to get a bit more horizontal. So I'll just sketch that in. And if you want, remember you can just use the traceable up over on Patreon, but you can also loose sketch it. You can also just look at the reference and work off that. But a lot of these are reaching upwards in little clusters, where a lot of these were horizontal or downwards. And then as we meet this midpoint, this area is going to start looking more like this area. This is very thin paint, as you can see, but that's okay because right now we're almost just drawing with the paint. We'll go in with more opaque layers after. We'll also add lots of snow and such. We just kind of have to make it through the awkward period. So, have faith in yourself, in the process. If you just keep painting, you will get there. And if you end up with branches that you don't like, remember that you can cover them in snow, or we can go back over them with more of the sky color. Though I do try to do a bit of a less is more approach with a lot of this, because it's a lot easier to add more branches than it is to take them away. So far, wall rough. I think we're doing a pretty good job. Just going back and adding lots of little branches and such. Going over areas that were a little bit thin. There we go. And, well, again, this is an area that we can get nice and detail heavy with. We are about to enter a very large spot of open canvas, and that will require a much larger brush. More intentionality later on, and for now, just kind of the fun of filling it in. So let's do that. Let's grab our large 1-inch. Let's say, okay, you know what? We have a very dense tree through here. Let's fill that out. Might as well go over the larger areas that do need a second application. Grab a little bit more water, that way the paint keeps moving smoothly. There we go. And then we have this nice big thick tree towards the bottom. Like that. Good silhouettes, good bookends. And soon, with snow, it'll look quite complete. Here I'm just building out, because again we went with a less is more approach, smaller initially, now we can add the volume we want. Now, while that dries, I think we'll head back up here and do a bit more intentional detail work, because I think often when I start these, and I do that less is more approach, A, we need to go back in and add more, but B, I feel like a lot of my first applications are about shaping the foliage, and then I want to go back in and elaborate on those shapes and those ideas. But because it's so much at once to do all of this detail, I kind of break it up into portions, and this way it just feels a lot more achievable, but also fun. If you ever feel like you're just doing too much detail, do just go down and fill in that larger area. Do a second layer. That's always beneficial. Especially with acrylics, I can tell that I need to do a second layer on mine. But so far so good. I do like this. I do like the variance in our trees. It's important that the left and the right hand trees look very different from each other. And I think we're accomplishing that. Remember to have your branches overlap each other, to have unique intricacies. maybe that's a very different branch than the other ones that we have. I like that. I think we also need some back here maybe. There we go. That's pretty good. Now we can take steps back, look at both sides as a whole, go back in where you feel like there might be room to expand on either until you feel like they exist within the same space. I think I did a better job of incorporating little branches in this one, so I'm kind of going back over here and doing more of that, just tiny little protrusions, not larger areas, but just the little stuff. And then I'll also do some pieces that flare up like that on this side. Not a lot, but I think because we have so many over here, we need a couple over here for the sake of general balance. And they're not too tricky. They are not too tricky. I think even doing that made a big difference, to be honest. I think we fill this out a little bit more. We'll have a lot of snow on these. We'll have a lot of snow over here too. We'll have a lot of snow period, but we are trying to envision it with that snow. So we're not making it overly detailed now, recognizing that that snow will add a lot of detail and volume. Isn't that a beautiful little set of framing devices? Here I'm going back in because that last layer was quite thin and you could see through it. And we'll just build this up until we have a nice thick base. And I think once this dries, we are ready to go in and start building form in the way that we did on here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are back to the painting. It is a brand new day and we have a fully dry canvas. Now, I'm going to begin by doing a bit of a glaze. We talked about this earlier, but I want this to progressively get darker as we move down here, and I feel like this just might be a little bit bright for the amount of light that's going to be moving through here, but also I need this area to be darker so that the fire that we have here can really stand out. So what we're going to do is very simple. We're going to take our large flathead brush. It is damp. We're going to grab a little bit of Oxide black, a little bit of ultramarine blue. We are going to add an abundance of water to our mix to the point where this is almost like a watercolor. I'm going to head to the bottom, like so. I'm going to work all the way across, and then I'm slowly going to blend it up, progressively losing that pigment as we work our way up. Now I think I'm going to add a little bit more Oxide black into that mix, moving slightly away from the blue, that way it's not too saturated. We're going to apply that to the base yet again, work that up, relieving pressure as I move up, that way it's less and less every time. And I think that's actually pretty great. I don't know that I want to do more with it. Maybe a hint on these, but for the most part, I think that's it. Just doing it towards the bottom of a couple individual larger branches. But the idea is to create that larger gradient, and I think we did exactly that. So, great, easy start to the day. Now we're going to head into the trees on the left and right hand side and start delivering some snow to the tops of those. So I think I'm going to move you just a little bit, and we'll begin at the top, as I think that's where we'll need the most detail and attention, and it's just going to be the most fun as well. Okay, so for the snow, as we've done before, we need a good amount of titanium white, our ultramarine blue, a little bit of oxide black. We don't want to start it too bright or too saturated. So we're looking for something in between. And we'll do a little test as we do. In our pre-existing areas of snow, I think this is a good one to test with because it's more of a middle to darker value. I think this is just slightly too desaturated, so we're going to add a little bit more blue into it. Try again, and that's pretty perfect. This is also your friendly reminder to not just go with the first pigment you mix. Keep going until you get what you really want. That said, we're back to our liner brush. It is nice and damp, and we can start applying some snow to the tops of these branches. And we can have the little areas that protrude out, little darker pieces. But we can also bring this to the very edges, like that. And then I'm going to have it lessen as we get back here because we're going to have these branches blocking the areas of snow that could fall on the back of the branch. So we have more snow towards the end. And I'll show you again, a lot of snow here because it protrudes, it can catch snow. But as we move back here, we're going to have less and less. And I'm just letting the water and the pigment run out as I move this way. And then I get this little patchy effect that looks like little clumps of snow. I'm trying to show you from far away. That way you get an idea of the larger effect. But again, we will get close so you can see the real details shortly. Just want you to see the variance of value, and that's typically easier from and afar. Okay. Now, we've done this to all of the ones on the right-hand side, or a lot of them. What about the ones in the middle? Because there will be ones that point directly out towards us. And with that, we're just going to wrap this around the tree. So through the center, leaving a little bit of a dark space underneath it. Going back, grabbing more water, more pigment. And just like that, we have a good branch in the midsection. We can do another one right through here. I think this will be the last one that we do from far away, and then I'll, as I noted, get you a lot closer. There we go. Okay, so we'll grab some of our blue. We'll head towards this one. Again, right-hand side, open area of canvas. I'm even creating some little openings in between these larger areas of blue. And then we lessen it as we get closer to the center, or the areas in which we feel it'll be covered. That said, we can definitely have another little branch right over here, like that. You can see that it goes through the midline, which is important. And we're still trying to make these all different. I'm also going to go over some of them a couple of times just to rebuild up that thickness, as this is acrylics. We are working with water. We are going to have thin layers here and there. It's also worth noting that the more you do of this, the more intuitive it will get. You will get pretty quick, pretty fast. Just try to remember the general rules we've instilled, and should end up with a really nice painting. It's worth noting that I did remix a little bit more pigment when I switched the camera angle. Often got questions of how do you keep your paint wet for so long, which is a great question and a fair question. I know some people mist their canvases with a little spritzer. I do not do that. I just add and mix new pigment as I go. I feel like I'm a fairly fast painter as a whole, so often I just do need to remix because I run out. But there are also times, of course, where it does dry on the palette and that's a part of it. That's okay. Now moving over to the other side here. And when we have these larger, darker areas, sometimes you can create multiple protrusions areas for foliage in it, and that can be pretty fun. Just creates additional variance, and I might even tap in little areas of snow, like one here, maybe one here, because the branches will vary in size quite dramatically. You want to try to capture that as best you can. Okay, I think we head up to this one. Again, a lot of loose little protrusions. We'll try to keep a good number of those, honor that under detail. But we'll also add a lot of snow because this really curves, kind of creates this bed for snow. Ooh, I don't know if you can hear that outside, but we have some pretty strong winter winds. Very atmospheric. I like that. There we are. Now, as we get towards the smaller branches, they won't have enough weight or mass to collect a lot of snow. So we're going to start being a little bit less application heavy, but we do still need to add some snow because there will be snow and it should be cohesive. There we are. Off to a great start. Quite proud of us. Okay. Now, before we move the camera, I think we can do a little bit more through here. And then we probably head down to these larger spots below. Very fun. Really like the blue and the oranges beside each other. Complementary colors, so they should help each other pop, but they're both very subdued versions of themselves. So it's a subtlety as well that you don't often get to see. Now, getting down here, the first thing I noticed is that our glaze worked really well. I like the added depth, I like the added shadow. It feels like these do cast a bit of a shadow. And with that, I want to make these a little bit darker as well. So we're just going to grab a little bit more Oxide black, work that into our mix, maybe a little bit more Ultramarine just so that it retains some saturation. And then, you guessed it, we're switching back to the liner brush. And we're working on these areas that are a bit more subdued, a bit darker, as they should be at this height. Now this one's going to cut across. Maybe it works its way back up the branch a little bit, but then it gets lost towards the top. These branches are much bigger, and therefore we're adding on significantly more paint. You could also use a small flat-headed brush for a lot of this if you feel like using the liner just takes too long or is a little cumbersome. But I think I'm very comfy with the liner. When I work at the top of this, I just use the edge of the liner, but here, as you'll see with this, I start to press more of the body of the liner into the canvas, and then you get this really big stroke. So it takes a lot less time than using just the tip. There I'm just using the tip. But you can kind of go back and forth with the liner, and I think that's a big part of the beauty of it. I'm also going to render a really big one right through here. And then I'll do some taps upwards to show that the snow is moving upwards. Almost connects to that one. But we'll also create a bit of a sharper bottom for it. Like that. Now one that's a bit more horizontal, I think. Maybe two. For scale. Head back up here, as we did have some snow in this area as well. Beautiful. Now, again, towards the bottom, I think we want one that's kind of sweeping like this. Try to get that base as sharp as you can, and then the top can be a bit more loose. You can see the tooth of the canvas as we come up. The paint runs out as we come up. It's a bit of a soft gradient, it's a bit of a textural gradient. One thing's for sure, it is a gradient. We can have the edge of it quite prominent as well. But you can see how these are a bit more horizontal, and as we come down, they start to droop and droop and droop. And a good way of thinking about these is like petals. If you had a large petal on the base of a flower, it would look pretty similar to this. Now we're going to do some small ones as well, because we have these really big ones and we want there to be variance in size. That way they look big, right? Comparison is important in these settings and ideas. Very good. And this will be a little bit brighter than this because it'll have light from the campfire. So I'm okay if this is in fact brighter, though we can always go over it the same way. It's also worth noting that we're probably not going to bring all of this detail down to the very bottom because we're going to cover some of this with snow down here, and it just wouldn't make sense to do it twice. So I think this is good. And we head on over to the other side for a little while. I say that and then I keep adding paint. Here I just have the tiniest amount of paint left on my brush. I'm just trying to add a little bit of texture into the negative space. Little taps, little markings that disrupt the larger ideas. Maybe it's a branch with a hint of snow, but just a little something. Okay, now, while I initially intended on heading up to the top of the other one, I realized we have this mix on our palette. We might as well use it over here. So we are going to do exactly that. And then we'll change our mix. And then we'll do something a little bit different. But while we're here, might as well take that time. Speaking of taking time, this painting has taken me many days so far. A lot of little details, a lot of little decisions. And I feel like as each day goes by, it does feel more and more like the holidays over here. And I just want to say I hope you're feeling that too. I hope those little interjections of the holiday spirit are making a difference. Just started, when it gets really late, making dinner, doing things like that, putting on Hallmark Christmas movies. And, you know, not typically regarded as the best films ever made, but there's something about them that just has this warm, innate charm. make you happy. You kind of laugh at them a little bit here and there, but I don't know. Just one of those things that I found really has added to this holiday season. I've never done this before. I've never given these a try, to be honest, but yeah. Maybe something to put on in the background while you paint. You don't really have to pay attention too much. It's just, you know, you hear the Christmas music, you get glimpses of the snow and the scenes, and it just puts you in the mindset. Now here we're really just doing more of what we were doing, which is more of this upside down petal-like shape. And I think you actually have a very heavy reflection on this. So let me just turn this a little bit, and now you can see it a little more clearly. Make sure that's nice and focused for you. Now we'll do some really big ones as well. That's great. There we go. Beautiful. Maybe a little bit more up here. But soon we do need to change this to be a bit of a brighter value. I'm excited to add the highlights. I think it's going to make a big difference. Also excited to finish for the sake of posting this for you. I wanted to have this out towards the start of December, but I just keep working on it. But we'll making a definitive pact with myself, a statement and a promise right here that I'm going to have this up by Sunday. So if you're watching this on Sunday, we did it. We accomplished the goal. But I'm going to try really hard to make that happen. Full day of painting today. And that too I'm excited about. Again, you can kind of hear the winds outside. It's a real winter day. And it feels like the right energy to dive into a painting like this for hours and hours. Okay, so we are back from a little lunch break, and we are now going to mix a slightly brighter blue than what we used down here, because we are heading towards the top of our tree, and you know what that means? It means we have more light on our subject. So I'm just going to mix up a good amount, and then we'll do a little test. I think this looks pretty good. I'll apply it initially on top of our last pigment, and it's slightly brighter, it's slightly more saturated. I think we could bump it up just a bit more. So more titanium white, which will desaturate, brighten, more ultramarine blue, which will brighten and saturate. And that looks pretty great. Okay, you know what? It's so close, a little bit more oxide black, and that's it. Now, you guessed it, we're back to the liner brush, and these branches a little bit different than the ones on the left because they are pointing upwards. So rather than creating these larger pools of snow, we are going over the individual little protrusions and branches for the most part, like that. And we can do little taps in between. So when there's a lot of negative space like this, we're actually going to go, again, towards the top where the snow will rest, but then we'll also do little taps and drags towards the foreground in here. And that means for these center points, again, we're not doing horizontal or sweeping motions, we're doing more vertical bell-like motions. It's different, but it makes sense. It's easy enough. And it looks good. I think you have a bit of a reflection on it from your angle. You can see on the camera. And the variance it's creating there is that it just looks a little bit brighter than it actually is. But it's very similar value-wise to the highlights that we have on this side of the canvas. It's also worth noting, you know what, actually I'll finish this top area because we started it. And it'll feel good to have this completed. That's something I think about a lot while I do paintings that require a lot of detail, a lot of layers, a lot of intricacy. How do I finish a section so that I get that sense of accomplishment and then move on to the next one? Sometimes I jump around a lot because I want to balance things appropriately, but sometimes I do want to feel like I finished something. So we do keep that in mind. That said, now that we're getting towards this section that has larger branches, we do get back to the more pooling snow, if you will. Pooling snow. Interesting. I said that, and then I was reminded, and this is going to be a strange little tangent. I was reminded of when I was a little one, and I went to the YMCA. And I'm not sure if they have those in America, but here in Canada, they're essentially like a little daycare system, I guess. And the little ones go during the day, during the summer and whatnot, when there's in school. And there are crafts and there are activities, and you watch movies, and you go to the park, play a lot of games. But ours had a big pool, and we also learned to swim. And my best friend, who I always call my brother, Henry, he was there, and we were learning to swim. And I don't know why this came to my head. I feel like I haven't thought about this in a decade, probably more. But the word pool, it just kind of brought me back. And again, I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of painting, is our ability to kind of go back in time, live in old favorite memories, but also find memories that we've since lost. Creates little triggers to do so sometimes, you know? And I don't know that the actual painting did that, or more I guess just the way I said it. I don't know. But it brought me there, and it's a very happy mental space. One, again, I haven't thought about in a long time, and now that I talk about it, I remember a lot of other little times there. And I think now, today, when I have some downtime, probably spend some real time exploring that. But yeah, just another beautiful benefit of art and what we do here. That said, I need more snow. Might make this even brighter than the last one because we are getting higher in the tree. And I added a lot of oxide black here by accident, so I'm working extra hard to brighten this back up. This could be good. Let's do a test. Let's do a test. Oh, that's great. It's slightly brighter, but so marginally that it doesn't look awkward. And then we have this transition area where it isn't necessarily pooling snow. It's kind of moving up like a lot of these, but at the same time, a lot of those markings are connected. A lot of the delicacy in painting trees comes from transitioning different types of applications through different weights of branches. And that's what we're doing. You know, I always talk about loving nostalgia and how art brings me there. We all paint for different reasons. I feel like that's been a long-standing reason of mine. Curious as to what your favorite reasons for painting are. If you wouldn't mind taking a second and putting that down in the comments, really think about why you like making art. Is it that you like a creative process? Is it that you like solving the puzzle that is the image and the painting? Is it the actual act of putting paint to canvas is cathartic? Is it that you feel like you have a lot of ideas in your head and you want to translate them? Is it that you've always felt good at art, and that in itself was a propellant and something that gets you excited about it? Is it the challenge? Is it the relaxing nature? Is it because a family member maybe did a lot of painting, a lot of art, and it was something you did together, or maybe it's a way of honoring somebody in your life? What brings you to art? What makes you passionate about that which we share together here? I feel like there could be a lot of reasons. And for me, the answer is definitely a lot. My mom and dad also very creative. My dad was always sketching different gardens or wood projects growing up, and my mom does so much. She does a lot of photography and does quilting and makes a lot of things. Very creative. I feel like during the holidays, my family and I would always make decorations too, in different forms, and that also was a big propellant and part of this. That said, I think we're ready for the next layer of highlight. Okay, now, yet again, we are mixing a brighter variant for our highlight. So more titanium white, more ultramarine blue. We don't want this to be significantly brighter, but we do want it to be brighter, and you can see that I'm mixing it in my past area because it'll give me that direct comparison and relation, so I know just how different this will be. And I think this will be a good test. So let's commit with the liner. Let's commit with the areas that really stick out. We're going to try to leave a lot of the darker snow still showing. So it almost will work in 3 layers right now, where the top of the branch has the bright highlight, and then it moves into the darker blue that we just applied, and then under that is the almost black, but it does have some blue in it. That's a common note. I feel like everybody who's ever made an art video has noted, but I will continue to note it. Friendly reminder to not use a pure black at the end of your application. So I will use a pure black in my mixes, but I won't ever have a pure black on the canvas. This isn't a pure black. It has blue and a little bit of white in it as well. And that's a necessary piece of creating atmosphere. There we go. Moving inwards just a little bit, but I'm trying to be very careful and cautious with this, not to overdo. And then we'll move down, but again, we'll be very cautious. As we start to wrap around the tree, it'll get lesser, but we are just trying to add a little bit of volume in here. And I think when I work on this bottom area, I'm not going to apply paint directly to it when or at least new paint. When I grab new paint, I'll apply it up here, and then when I start to run out of this paint, and I have just a little bit left on my brush, then I'll come down here and I'll make that application. But this is never the first step with new paint, because I don't want it to be too bright, and this is a good way of ensuring that we get there in a controlled manner. There we go. And this will have a little bit more light because we were next to the fire. But still, controlled. I'm doing a rounded motion with my brush just to get a soft blend for the most part. There we go. That's nice. Again, back up to the top. And I will get you a lot closer for the detail work. Right now. Now the real test here is just not overdoing it. So little taps towards the top, little taps towards the top. Fun little protrusions. It doesn't always go all the way across. Sometimes there are little breaks. Initially it'll probably look a little awkward and that it'll be quite stark next to everything else. But the more you do, the more it'll feel like it fits in place. And you will get to a balance you like. It'll also feel a lot better once you apply it to the other side of the canvas as well. There we go. Growing up, we were out by the forests and there was always trees covered in snow, gigantic ones, and it was always pretty magical. You know, I think a lot of people say when I was a kid, I didn't really recognize it. I didn't really appreciate it. I think as a kid, I knew this was quite the sight. It's probably because I was drawing and painting landscapes quite young, but now live downtown Toronto. We don't really have trees like this out here. At least not downtown. But I found a real love for just seeing snow on the tops of buildings. And I think it just goes to show that you can find that kind of magic of the holiday season wherever you are. It's about framing. It's about looking to find it, keeping your eyes open and having that open mind. Yeah. This is good. This is very good. Okay, so now we're heading over to the left-hand side to do essentially what we just did on the right-hand side. However, these trees are a little bit different, right? It's less of the smaller protrusions and more of these larger, already established pieces. And with this, we're going to have this bright snow towards the ends and the tops of these branches, but it'll pretty quickly subdue as you move towards the center. So we don't want a lot of highlight on here. I think because this is a much bigger area, if we were to do all of the highlight on it, it would probably look like too much too quickly, which is why you are so far away from the painting right now. I just want you to see balance-wise what we're going for. Because again, more so than detail, what's important here is getting the right amount of highlight to the right amount of shadow. It'll also be kind of nice if we have a good amount of highlight towards the edge on the right-hand side of this tree, but then very little highlight on the left-hand side because it'll create a vignette, and the eye, as you move towards the center of the painting, will get brighter. As we know, the eye innately goes to the brightest point of any piece, so it will lead the eye subconsciously in the ways that we want it to. Here we're being pretty careful with not doing too much highlight in the center, but whenever I see the open sky, I try to do a little bit of highlight right under it because it will get more light. It's
It's all about finding that correct progression of highlight. And if you're worried that you might do too much, just go in with a little bit more water in your mix. You'll have a more semi-transparent application, and you'll need to do more layers to build it up. There we go. Through there, good. Down there, good. Okay. I think that looks well illuminated. I don't know that I've loved working on a piece this much in a long time. I always enjoy painting. And I think I always am proud of what I make in the end, but I think the actual process of this one, memorably wonderful. Kind of funny how sometimes they just have that effect, isn't it? Okay, that said, I think this is all very good. I don't know that I need to add any additional highlights towards the top. Towards the bottom, however, we do still need highlights, but this is too bright, so we're going to darken it. A little bit of blue, a little bit of oxide black. We still want it to be a highlight, but we want it to be a darker highlight. Like so. Like so. There we are. Lovely. Voluminous. All the things you want it to be. Also, I know that I'm getting a little bit more quiet, and I'll be honest, I'm just really enjoying what I'm doing. I think I'm getting lost in it a little bit. So I apologize. I will try to be a little more communicative again about the process. But if I ever get really quiet, just know that that's actually a sign that I am loving what I'm doing. And I hope you find yourself in that place too. Okay, now we're going to head down in the canvas yet again, and we are going to have a lot of fun covering the remainder of the white on the canvas. And this does mean what you think it means. It means a dark base layer, very rich with ultramarine blue, a little bit of titanium white. And we are going to cover the remainder of our drawing of fire. That's okay. We can always go back and re-implement that. But we are going to start with a very dark bluish base. Blend that up into the darks of the trees. That'll look a little bit cleaner for a while, which is nice. I am moving my brush in an X-shaped pattern to move the pigment about. Well, grab a little bit more of everything as we do. And we'll just finish off this base layer. And then we'll proceed to let it dry fully before we go in with our first application of snow. But always feels great to cover the entirety of the white of the canvas, and we have just accomplished that here. Giving it a good couple thick coats. Now, for the bottom here,
We want this area in the middle to be quite bright because it'll have a lot of reflection from the campfire that we're yet to paint, and then it'll get a little bit darker as we move towards the edges, but even this will still have a decent amount of light because of what we have there. So we're going to start with our snow by grabbing some titanium white, ultramarine blue, and I'm mixing a good amount of it, a little bit of oxide black, because we're going to have a fairly large area to accommodate for, right? So we'll make a mid-value blue. We'll test it in our tree, and it looks like one of the brighter values that we have for sure. I think we could go a little bit darker for our first application. So back to the oxide black, which will darken it, but of course it will also desaturate it. So to reinstigate that saturation, more ultramarine blue. Do another little test up in our tree, and that's perfect. So from here, we're going to go, again, right towards the center. I'm going to leave a little bit of a space at the bottom because I want this to be slightly darker than here. That way we have more of that vignette effect. I'll start blending it out to the left and right. And then once we have this nice oval shape, we'll make our brush nice and damp. We'll make our mix a little bit darker, a little bit more blue. Just move in these directions. We'll apply that here, here, towards the bottom, towards the back, and then we'll just softly blend into that highlight. I'm going to make my brush more vertical rather than horizontal. That way I can get some of this highlight to work its way out into the edge and some of the shadow to work its way into the highlight, and that way it looks like we have small little mounds of snow. Really quick and easy way to get some depth into this setting. And then as we get towards the edges, we don't want to just keep dragging it as I was doing. We want to add a little bit more oxide black, a little bit more ultramarine blue. We go darker. We apply that to both sides. We apply that a little bit to the top. And we work this out. Again, nice, easy ways of developing this space pretty quickly. I think this side could be a little brighter. So we'll do that. And I think I also want a bit of a brighter top to some of the backing snow. So I'm going to go to the liner. I'm going to grab some of the highlight that we still have. This is in the sketch. We'll just create the tops of some snow, some raised areas, little bumps. Almost looks like rocks, but it's more so just ground. Some of it's rocks, some of it's logs. And then we'll kind of work that inwards, so down. And then we can do more of them. But this will just make it look like there's some real depth behind here to here. We do need some soft blends, some believable transitions, so we'll do some soft blends as well. Like that. So that's just a lot more water on the brush. There we go. You can see it all. It's all starting to fit together. The water's making it alive again because it wasn't fully dry. It started to dry, but it wasn't fully dry, and therefore it was still malleable. We were able to get in there. We can also take the darker pigments and cut in between there if we want to. Like so. But I think that's a great start. Okay, now I think we take more of that highlight and we start to work some of our trees down into it. So here's just a little branch that's finding its way down. Maybe we have another one right here. Like that. But you can see that it almost just blends directly into the ground, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for it to become part of the scene in a grander way. We might make some more diagonal markings, which kind of move in line with the edge of the tree throughout this bottom section, just to show that there are some little branches that stick up higher. And it also creates a nice bridge for this space. There we go. Maybe a little bit over here. So far, so good. Blend that down to the bottom, up to the top. We soften that area because there'll be a shadow through there. Then maybe we grab a little bit more titanium white, brighten that up. Get this edge. Because again, we do want this to be brighter than what we have back here. And there will be a lot of light to go around. Now I'm going in dry brushing these strokes on, highlights, but because the brush is dry, we're getting more of the tooth of the canvas show through, which is actually nice because it looks like snow texture. So don't feel like it has to be perfectly smooth in these areas, because it doesn't. That said, if you want to, you can go back and smooth it by just adding a little bit of water to your brush and doing so. I'm not doing so right now for the sake of smoothing. I'm doing so more just for the sake of moving it out and around a bit more. Also to lessen the patches of really bright areas that sometimes happen in that process. There we go. That looks like nice snow blowing about. A little bit more through here, where the light's really going to be. Using the liner, I'm just kind of working in circles using the side of the brush rather than the tip of it. And when your brush is a little bit damp, this works really well for settings like these. Let's do with a little bit more. Slightly less water, because I do want it to look a little stretchy, a little textured, and that's much better. Okay, I'm taking a step back, giving it a good look, and I think I actually really like where this all is right now. So we're just going to do a hint more highlight. Good. 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 Now we can go back to working on the campfire. And this starts with 3 little logs. Now we have our oxide black in our mix, and that's good, but to make the brown, we could use a burnt umber. I talked about this in the color analysis video up over on Patreon, but we could use a brown. However, I think we'll get a much more complex, interesting color if we use our yellow, orange, and red. Though, as you can see, these have all dried. So I'm going to grab more of these, then we'll mix our color for this, and we'll start working on a nice little campfire. Okay, so from here, we are going to grab a little bit of our fresh yellow, cad orange, cad red. You can see that we have a nice orange rendered. What happens when we add the blue, the complementary color to orange? It starts to get a little bit more brown, especially when we add in a hint of titanium white and oxide black. When you mix complementary colors together, colors opposite to each other on the color wheel, typically they gray each other out, and in this case render more of an earthy brown, which is perfect for what we're looking to do here. We're going to make ours nice and dark, so a lot of oxide black in the mix, and then we're going to create 3 primary logs for our fire. So I'm going to start with one right here, using the large flat-headed brush to do the initial work because it's kind of perfect for creating these shapes. All right, it's these long cylinders, but they'll probably look like rectangles. Now we need another one that protrudes a little closer to us, like this. The tops of these will very much be covered by the actual fire, so not to worry too much about that. Then we have another big one over here, like so. Perfect. At this point, we can also now switch to the liner and do little ones, should we want to. And these will be more vertical. You don't have to do these. We'll probably cover them up mostly with fire, but just to show you that you can make it a little more diverse if you want to. After that, we go for a darker variant of this mix. So more Oxide black, though it still has the other color in it. And we're going to apply this to the bases of them, like so. So the underside that will not be seen by the actual fire, because the fire will be delivering a lot of the light to them, so the areas on the opposite side will be darker. There we are. Then once we have these lines ready to go and applied, we're going to make our brush a little bit more damp, and then you can either grab some of the initial color for the blend if it's dry, but if it's not, it's still a little bit wet like mine, you can just softly move one color into the next, create a bit of a gradient. And I do want these to be darker as a whole, so I'll probably go in a couple of times with those darker mixes, because as we blend these, we make the darks a lot less dark, because we're blending a lot of light into them. You actually want these to be pretty dark for this initial base. We'll have the opportunity to add more light in later if we want to, but we just want there to be a hint of the brown. We don't want it to be dramatic or saturated. We want that to be subtle. We just need sharp lines. That's what's really important. Like that. Now this will also cast little shadows in the snow. So for that we can grab some of our ultramarine blue, titanium white, Oxide black. We're just mixing up a darker snow. So similar to that which we've done many a time. And we'll just place this, once we have the right value, underneath here and blend it out. Under the actual logs. There we go. Okay, the next step means letting this dry. That way we can go back in with our highlight. We are very close to the exciting steps. At this point, I would strongly recommend you clean your water, you clean your brushes, and then we'll work with some really nice highlights. Here I accidentally grabbed a little bit of the original brown that we had. And you know what, I actually kind of like it towards the top of these. So this was a happy little accident, but I'm going to double down on it. If you still have a little bit of that brighter brown, do work it back on towards the tops, and as long as it looks natural, right? That's the important part. But I think it does. I think it actually looks really good. Okay, so taking a step back, I think that's looking pretty great. It is fully dry to the touch. Our brushes and our water are clean, and we can proceed by mixing up our first pigment for our Campfire. Now, typically we layer from the red mixes to the orange mixes to the yellow mixes to the almost white mixes, and we do so because if we layer red over blue, we typically get still a red. It might be more of a purpley red, it might have a little bit of blue undertones, but it's still a red. If we layer a yellow on top of this blue, we'll probably get a green. So we need our backing layers to be a bit more red dominant, and then they slowly work this way on the palette as it gets safer to do so. So our Campfire initially is going to look a little bit awkward, but recognize that it's all about building layers and getting to where we want to over time. With that, we will grab some of our cadmium red, move that to a clean spot here on our palette, grab a little bit of our cadmium orange to complexify the color, hint of cadmium yellow. It's okay if we have cadmium yellow in here, it just can't be cadmium yellow dominant. And then we can also grab either a titanium white or a Naples yellow. I'm going to do both. The Naples yellow will give us slightly less of a pink hue, where the titanium white will make it a little bit more pink. And that just comes with brightening red. You can also use cad orange to give it a little bit more of that fiery pigment yet again. But you don't want it to be too saturated, which is why the Naples yellow or the titanium white are a strong inclusion from the beginning. With that, let's get you a little bit closer and let's start working on our fire. Okay, now we can begin with two brushes, one of which is our filbert, something we haven't used a lot, but it has those nice rounded edges, great for clouds, great for flames, great for mist or fog. And we can dry brush this on initially to build a bit more of a thick base, and I'll show you what I mean. My brush has not touched water. I'm actively avoiding it. I'm working it on the tops of our logs, and then I'm going to, from the central point, which I'm actually going to let dry just a little bit because I don't want to rip all of the paint off of there. But once it has started to dry just a little bit, I am going to start sweeping it upwards in the shapes that our fire will move and take form. Now, as you can see, as we move farther out from the middle, it gets more and more transparent, and that's how we want it, especially in this first layer. And this gives us an opportunity to draw flame softly in a non-committal way, but we're just trying to get the general body of it. It's nice if we have some transparency, but the center, where the main heat and light is, should be a bit more opaque, and then it gets, again, more transparent as you get towards the edges. This is a nice start. This is a very nice start. Then we do a bit more of a softer movement towards the top. You could make it wispy if you'd like to. I'm just using the remainder of my dry paint to move outwards and just make sure this looks nice and warm, like so. But that is essentially what our first layer is meant to look like. Very simple, very basic. I'm not going to mix with this brush. I'm also not going to wet it just yet, because I'm going to use it again very shortly. Now we're going to add a lot more cad yellow into the mix, a lot more Naples yellow. We're going to create a brighter pigment, a more opaque pigment, and a pigment that is, again, also just a little bit more yellow. We'll go back to that filbert brush. We're going to go back again into the absolute center, and we're going to follow a very similar idea of working our way up and out from that midsection. We can also add a hint of this out onto the logs as the flames will present there. Softly building up. You really want to take this slow because it's easy to add more, but it's very difficult to go back and repaint that base layer. So we're doing little bit by little bit. Nice warmth. So easy. So easy. Can do little bits of highlights sparking up towards the top, though we'll do a lot more of that with a liner soon. And again, just a little bit of a glow over all of it once I'm almost out of paint, and I just work on a hint of that heat. Now, I'm going to put this brush down. And at this point, actually, we probably take this brush and we put it in the water and we retire it for a while. Because at this point, we are in a more detailed realm where we'll use more cad yellow, more Naples yellow, more titanium white. Beautiful, thick. That's a good pigment right there. Let's get you a little bit closer too. So from here, we are yet again back to the liner. We are grabbing that pigment we just created. We're throwing that in the heart of the fire. We'll work it very subtly down some of our logs with a little bit of a tap, but I'm leaving the orange underneath it and towards the end. So this doesn't go to the very end. It just sits in the middle of the pre-existing orange applications. And then we're going to start working this upwards in areas that feel safe. So we have a lot of orange up here, so we can move through there. I'm doing it with a lot of little taps, but I'm trying to create lines. So you can see how this line goes that way, and then this moves up that way. And I'll do a bit more of that so you can really see. I feel like I paint a campfire every year, and every year I get a little better at it. I change my techniques, we learn, we grow. And I think this isn't a big campfire, but I've definitely found ways of making it better. Maybe we still do a big campfire. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see an updated version of our campfire paintings, because I always love doing those. And I figured this year we'd just do a small one like this, but definitely open to continuing the tradition of doing the bigger ones. There we go. Now it feels like it's erupting up into the sky a little bit. We'll add some extra titanium white to the mix. We'll add that back to the heart of it. And this is really the process. You start with the red, you go to the orange, you go to the yellow, and then you go to the warm white. There's some little sparks. Trying to get really small markings up here. There we go. Starting to feel alive. Maybe we do a hint on this, a hint down here, hint through there. Like so. And then maybe we even go back to more of the oranges and the reds in areas where we want to expand, but we don't want to do it with bigger highlights, right? So up here, I definitely wanted more movement. I wanted to kind of fly out that way here. Started with a much smaller fire than I knew I would have in the end, because again, it's just so easy to add, but it's tricky to take away. It's not impossible. You can always go back and paint the background. That is the beauty of acrylics. They are so forgiving with that. But if you can make it really easy and not have to go back and repaint the background, then, you know, even better. Even better. Oh yeah. Little taps for sparks that are just exiting the space. We can also take a little bit of the wider mix, so you can see I have the reds, the yellows, and the orange. I can see in the camera that the palette's very, very blurry right now, but you get the idea. And then we'll just throw that out here very softly. Grab a lot of water. Start to blend that out. This is a lot like a wash, a glaze, if you will. It's more of a glaze than it is actually painting in our traditional way. I'm just working that heat, that light out. That's pretty beautiful. That's what we're looking for. I'm just going to use my finger, do a little more softening. That's something you do have to be careful of, because when you use your finger, you deliver a lot of oils to the canvas, and sometimes those oils make it difficult to apply new pigments. So I only do it when my hands are freshly washed and clean with soap and such. Luckily mine were, because I just washed my hands while I was washing the brushes and cleaning the water dish. But if you're going to use your fingers to blend, do wash them well with soap, and then make sure they're also fully dry. That way you're not delivering additional water you don't want onto the canvas. You can see that we're slowly building up this heat, this warmth, step by step, layer by layer, minute amount by minute amount. Beautiful. Warm, all of the things we want it to be. You can see that we're also slowly expanding it out. Didn't happen quickly, didn't happen on the first application. It's taking its time. And then we can also work a little bit of it out over here. And that's how we tie the background into the foreground. It's also how we explain the light on these areas down here when these areas are so dark. So I'm just taking more of the exact same pigments we were working with. I'm not doing anything too unique or special here. More of the same. But that more of the same is, I would say, doing a lot. There we go. Okay, I think we go brighter again. Even down here. I'm going to be very careful with this because it is quite bright, but we've just built that nice orange base over the blue so we can apply the yellow again a lot more safely. We don't want too much yellow, but just enough to feel realistic, because the snow is going to be highly reflective, right? So we need it to reflect the fire it is ever so close to. Like that. And as we build this out, we realize that we can also expand upon the fire itself and make it bigger, warmer. So more orange. There's our base there. Might have just added a little bit too much, but we'll see. We will see. Ooh, I actually really like that. It's getting powerful. Okay, just taking a moment to look at it, think about it. I think we add a little bit more orange and red to this side, just because it was a little yellow dominant. And we can work it back to being more of that orange that we want. I think that is better. Question is, do we go in more? I think we try it. We can always brighten it with more yellow again. I think what we lost here though was unique dimensionality, because now it kind of feels like a teardrop shape, where before I think it was a bit more unique. So I think we retry to find that. We'll add some highlight in through the center here, but we'll break it up into two different streams of highlight. Have it kind of spark off to the right hand side here, create multiple channels. And now up here you get these really neat transitions where we go from sparks to the openings in the trees. And it's difficult to differentiate between the two, and that was always the goal. Very good. Nice crackle towards the back. Really starting to come alive. Trying to create some good separation between them. But initially, I think the biggest challenge with this image from the reference was that there was a lot of brightness towards the top, but not towards the bottom. And we added this fire. Again, it wasn't in the reference photo. It was just something we decided to take an artistic liberty with for the sake of adding light to the base. And I think we were definitely successful. Lots of these minute taps to add textural detail. Fire should look alive, dancing, flowing, like so. I really like the idea of having more over here to balance it, light-wise. Okay, so we are back to the evening, and we, as promised, are finishing this painting today. Now, when we take a step back, I think we can learn quite a few things. The first, this area is very bright, and I love that, but I want to incorporate that brightness down here as well. When we were painting it, I think that it had a lot of brightness, but as it dried, it got a little bit darker. common for acrylics, but something we can work on. I think we can also add some additional sparks, maybe some additional light through here and on here. I also kind of want to add some little branches throughout these spaces. So there's a good number of things we can do to continue improving our painting, but we are going to start with our fire, which means titanium white, a little bit of cad yellow, a little bit of Naples yellow. Love Naples yellow. Just get that bright, warm, but less saturated look. We'll switch on over to, you guessed it, the liner brush. And I'm going to do some painting with you rather far away, because right now, more than anything, it is again about balancing. So we add some real highlight down through here. I'm going to be very selective with how we do so, like that. Beautiful, stands out so much more with just a couple additions. I think we can also build that up, and that way it meets the sky and we create that continued bridge. I think I also want a little bit of it through here. I want two different lanes with the fire. That way it's just a bit more interesting. But again, we're being careful with the amount that we add, and I think that was pretty perfect. So we have some added light. As it's drying, I can tell that it's darkening a little bit, so I might go back in and add a couple layers of that. I might also just make it slightly brighter for the heart of the flame. And this is the only place I'm applying this grand highlight. Like that. Okay, beautiful, great start. From here, I think we add some additional sparks for the area. And with that, we're going to grab some of our cadmium orange, a little bit of our cadmium red, a little bit of our cadmium yellow, Naples yellow, grand abundance of water. I'm going to make this almost like watercolor. And if you've watched the channel for a long time, you know what I'm going to do. We're going to take our liner, make sure it's very wet. We're going to grab some of this wet pigment, put our easel down. We're going to line our brush up with the fire itself, so vertically. And then I'm going to peel back the bristles, and I'm going to let go. And it's just going to launch a series of little sparks into the sky and create a lot of little transitional pieces of light that'll move us into the openings in the sky. So you don't have to do a lot of this. You can if you want to, but it's a great way of building atmosphere. The closer you get to the canvas, the more you'll be able to render individual lines. But for the most part here, I just want a hint of it. I want that feeling, that crackle, that burst. Just adds a lot of life and energy into the painting. That said, we do still want a little bit more warmth towards the bottom in here. So with that, I think we'll mix up our red, our orange, Naples yellow, maybe a little bit of cad yellow, but not too much. We don't want this to be oversaturated or overly bright. Go back to the liner. Grab just a very watery mix of it because I don't want it to be too strong. We can add that just to the edges. Not much. Not much. We want to be very careful with our amounts. Work that towards the back. And blend it on through. We've added a lot of layers like this. This is just yet another. But the real lesson here is that we add little bit by little bit, and eventually we get something we love. Beautiful. Good glow. Now we can add a bit more to say the bottoms of these. some of the reflective snow, because it will reflect light, and there is a lot of light coming from this area. Again, it's almost like a watercolor painting right now with how we're approaching this, and that's how it should be. But the real goal is to paint a glow, paint a light, paint this reflective light from the fire. And create little mounds of snow on the sides that still catch more light. But I think that's a great amount for that area. Now we switch on over to our large flat-headed brush. I think we'll grab some Oxide black, Ultramarine blue, hint of titanium white. Makes up a nice dark pigment, something very similar to what we used in the trees above. And I'm just going to incorporate some little branches from tree to tree. So these are not prominent. They're just adding scale and variance. And I'm not even sure if you'll be able to see them from where you are, but that's kind of the point. They're meant to be that small and subtle. They're just the start of branches sticking out to the point where they will eventually build into big branches. But they don't have any snow on them. There we go. I'm going to take another step back, take a look at it. Maybe we put another couple branches through here. I like those. Connect this one to this one. Oh, I'm not sure if you can hear that in the background, but that is the sound of the oven. And that means that some oatmeal cookies are almost ready. What a wonderful little reward for finishing a painting. You know? I feel like there's something very wholesome about an oatmeal cookie. I remember when I was growing up, my dad would make these incredible oatmeal cookies. And if he was going to bake, there was one thing I was asking for, and it was those. Also makes great pancakes. All the good wholesome food. All the wholesome food. There we go. My mom, when I was growing up, would make the best stir fries. Oh. You know, it's not close to dinner time, but I'm getting a little hungry now. I'm getting a little excited about those cookies. That said, we are still just adding very small little additions, little branches, having these leaf up. And I think we are really just about done this one. I've loved painting this. I think this is the painting I've had the most fun working on in a really long time. And if you are painting this with me, I hope that you are sharing in that enjoyment, that you're also finding it fulfilling. And if you are watching along before you start painting it, I would encourage you to do this one. I think this is a great primer for winter paintings to come. I think it's a very relaxed process as a whole. And I just have faith that we'll all do a very lovely job. But with that, I would like to say a big thank you to all of you for being here yet again. Remember, you can get the traceables up over on Patreon. You can get the real-time drawing video where you can see me sketching out the painting from the beginning. You can also get over 100 bonus lessons where we do a bunch of various subjects. You can get my ebooks. There's a lot of really fun things up there, and it's just a great way to support the channel and say thank you if you can. If you can't,
absolutely no worries. Just appreciate you being here and being a part of the community. Thank you, by the way, for making it to the end of these. I think on average, it's 13% of people make it to the very end. So if you are part of that 13%, congratulations on being one of the dedicated painters who, you know, I think has a really good shot at doing a great job. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the community. To everybody up over on Patreon supporting the channel directly, thank you for making these lessons happen. Without you, they couldn't, and I'm just always very grateful. So with that, enjoy your painting process. I will see you soon with a brand new painting lesson. And above all, as always, stay creative.